Jade, hi, welcome to the show.
Thank you for inviting me along.
So, you're an interior designer. Where did that love and appreciation of interior design come from?
Oh, it goes back a little while. So I am actually a trained typographer and graphic designer, and I have been in doing that. I've been in that industry for over 20 years, heading up creative and brand teams. And I then started going into sort of managing teams, and my role became a little bit less creative. So kind of getting into the interior side kind of was a creative outlet for me. And kind of how it started was back in 2018, my husband and I were going through a series of IVF cycles, and they were unsuccessful cycles. So obviously, for anyone who's ever been through IVF knows how all consuming it is. And it was one of those things that we kind of just wanted a bit of a refocus because all of our energy was going into these cycles. So we'd been in our house in Worthing for about 3 or 4 years. And when we moved in, it didn't need anything doing. It was very neutral, and everything was fine. But it got to the point where we were like, actually, it's time for us to start doing a little bit of decorating. So we started doing a few different rooms, and I thought at the time, do you know what, I'm going to document this on Instagram. I'd seen other people do it, just to kind of document the kind of renovation that we were doing. And then it kind of became a bit of a bug for me. I just absolutely loved it. And I like the reaction that people were getting to it, because I wasn't trained. I obviously have a creative background, but I wasn't trained in interiors in any way, and it was kind of just that natural creative that kind of came out in our home. And we started getting bolder and braver in the things that we were doing, and we kind of was doing a knock through from one room to another, and we had a big hole in the wall. There was plaster off, there were skirting boards were off, and everything. And then my husband, I think it was over Easter. It was in the middle of lockdown, and my husband saw this house on I don't know where he saw it in the end. He can't remember. So he said, Jade, I think we've got a bit of a problem. And I was like, what? And he said, this house has just come up. And we had no intentions of moving or anything at the time. Like I say, we were in the middle of, I think it was like lockdown part 2 or something. We had no intentions of moving. And this house came up, and it was everything that we always said we'd wanted. It was Georgian, it was double fronted, it had a little balcony, and we just decided that we kind of thought, oh, well, because basically my husband is from Lincoln. He's born and bred in Lincoln, but always said he'd never move back there. And we were on the south coast, and I said, "Where's Laos?" And he said, "Oh, it's in Lincolnshire," but he didn't know it. And we couldn't stop thinking about this house. We couldn't go and see it anyway because we were in lockdown, but we just couldn't stop thinking about it. We knew that it was something that probably needed a lot of work, and it had been on the market for a little while. Anyway, we kind of just sort of forgot about it, continued with our renovation project that we were doing, finished it. And then this was, I think, the April, and then June came, and we kind of came out of lockdown, and we were able to go, and then we came to see the house. And that's kind of how we were introduced to Trinity Lodge. And I think that's where, as much as the Instagram account was kind of, I had a number of followers, and we'd been doing all this work, it was really only until we moved to Trinity Lodge that the real love for renovation and interiors really kind of came into play. I spoke to my then boss at the time and sort of said to her, obviously, am I able to, would it be possible for me to relocate? I was working from home, obviously everybody was at the time, and she was very, very supportive of that. And we put an offer in, and the kind of rest is history. And we've been here for a couple of years now, but it was one of those things that I think this house was almost like the catalyst to the interior journey. Although it started a little bit beforehand, it was really this house that started it. And I remember the night that we moved in here. So the previous owners had lots of stuff. We knew it needed a lot of work. I remember the night we kind of got in delivery, that the removal guys had left, and we were just so overwhelmed by how much there was to do. So I think that because interiors was a bit of a passion, I think I'd done a little bit of professional development in that side of things. So I was still working in my corporate role as a creative director, but because interiors really had my heart, and it was the thing that it was this brilliant creative outlet that allowed me to, I wasn't having that, I wasn't getting that in my day job. And it just allowed me to do something that I really loved. And it kind of got, I was so excited about the next project. And then it kind of, as kind of moved on in terms of now me doing it for us in our home, but for other people as well. And so, I think that's kind of how we got to it.
Amazing. I love that description of you. You'd arrived, you'd moved, you'd got the keys, the delivery men had gone, suddenly it was quiet, you're surrounded by everything you own in this renovation project, and you're like, oh, okay.
Yeah,
See you later,
it was
guys.
exactly that. Yeah, and we'd moved from a three-bedroom Victorian house into this quite big house, and everything was just a bit lost in there. And yeah, it was. And I remember we obviously had no food in, so we tried to order some food online. And Louth is semi-rural, so it's a market town, a quite big market town. So it does have, some convenient things, but we were used to Deliveroo and Just Eat and all the things that you could. And I remember we went on to Just Eat, and there were 4 things on there. And we were just like, oh my gosh, where have we moved to?
That's probably quite
Civilization.
good for some places. Some people are probably listening to it like, there's 4 things on there.
Yeah.
Quite good.
And I think 2 of them were closed. We ended up getting a pizza in the end, which wasn't very good. But obviously, we've learned to kind of, we don't get takeaways anymore because you can't really get access to them. But yeah, I think it was a bit of an eye opener, especially I'm quite a city girl. I like, I'm used to having, access to all the shops and things, and the shops here close at 4 o'clock. It's not open, there's nothing open on a Sunday or a Monday, or some not even a Tuesday. So, it has its pros and cons, but I think that, I absolutely love it here. And everybody's been so welcoming and friendly, and it's a very different pace of life to what it is down on the south coast. Even though you're by the sea and it's all kind of relaxed, it feels even slower and more kind of considered here, which I really love.
With the English countryside, and the UK generally, but if we look at England, and obviously there is actually quite a big difference between north and south, but if we take it as wholesale, people say on Instagram, they'll romanticize moving to the English countryside to a beautiful cottage, and you're going to grow roses, and there's going to be like chickens in your kitchen, and it'll all be beautiful, and the lovely sunshine's coming in, and when it's raining, it's fine because it's beautiful still. So obviously there's pros, and there's obviously cons, such as Just Eat. So I'm just wondering, okay, objectively, what would be your pros and cons having experienced it firsthand to someone who maybe is getting sucked into the beautiful reels that they are accurate in some ways, but there are inaccurate things as well.
They're absolutely accurate, but there's a lot of hard work that goes behind getting it to that point. I think about, you're talking about roses in the garden. Our garden has taken two, I mean, we focused on the house more so than anything. In the garden, we've done bits and pieces, but we were used to having a tiny little decking area and a bit of a courtyard and had some pots. We've moved here and we've got a garden, a quite big front garden and a decent sized back garden. And it wasn't, obviously there was lots of modern flowers, didn't really suit the house. So we're in a position now where we're like, okay, now we want to get the country garden with the roses and the cottage style garden that with the beautiful path. And that's a lot of work that goes in behind the scenes of that. So eventually I'll be able to post those reels of the romantic view of our house and everything, but at the moment it's not the case. But however, on our doorstep, just a little walk down the road or a little drive down the road, we have access to the most beautiful countryside in terms of we're in the middle, we're on the edge of the Lincolnshire Wold, so we've got rolling hills, and it's really beautiful when you drive in. We've got the coast actually not that far from where we are, and it's a coast that we're not used to because it's as far as the eye can see beach, and there's nobody apart from a few dog walkers and people riding their horses, and that is romantic. It definitely, I think, yes, there are obviously lots of pros to living in the countryside, because it is very beautiful. But in terms of like our sort of immediate area, it's going to take us a lot of time to get to that point. We'd love to have chickens, but I can't imagine my husband would even like entertain it. I would even love to have a goat, but I just don't. There's just so much to do, and when you lead a busy life, I'm not actually sure how you would keep the upkeep of livestock in the garden. Yeah, I think it's quite a bit of work, and but it's definitely, you can definitely get it, but it just takes a few years to get there, I think.
Exactly. And I think all of these things just take a lot of hard work, and maybe a little time lapse that you might see online is not actually accurate. It could take three
Oh
years to
gosh, I
get there. So
know. I've done it myself, and absolutely, we've spent some time doing our landing and stairs, and I think we calculated that it was about 250 hours of work me and my husband had put into it. And yeah, if only it were that quick, that magic wand.
exactly. But also it's the journey that we enjoy, and not to be
Absolutely.
cliche. But when it's done, you'll probably think, okay, what's my next project then? What am I looking at next? Which is quite funny how the human brain works in that sense, always
It
looking
is.
ahead. But I wanted to ask you, so you have your corporate background that is your job, and then you suddenly see this like more, obviously your job is creative, but this creative outlet in terms of interior design. So it's kind of stark contrast, because although they're both creative, they're kind of, one is one side and one is the other side of the creative market. Because when you go into corporate scene, it's creative, but it's not quite like, I'm going to knock this wall down and make a big open plan kitchen and then paint it whatever color I want. Like, that is completely opposite, I imagine. So how is that kind of contrast, and why did it appeal to you? Why did you think, hold on, I'm going to go to the complete opposite of the creative realm and enjoy this project as well?
I absolutely love my job. I still, as a designer, I love typography. I love everything, and that will always stick with me. And it's been an amazing foundation to where I've got to, because it's almost been a bit of a head start, allowed me to get to where I am now. It's a very different world in the corporate world, because obviously you're working with hierarchy, you're working with like lots of layers within an organization. You've got different types of budgets that you're working with. You're working with big teams. I had a team that reported into me, and I had a team of like 12 people, but they were across the world, in the US and India. And I think that my role became, whilst in when you're younger and you're a designer, it's very creative because you're doing all the things you love. But as soon as you start to manage people, that's where you lose the creativity. So it's about managing people, doing brand strategy, all those sorts of things. And I was just feeling as though the place that I was in at the time, because I'd been there for 14 years, I didn't feel like I was developing creatively there. So any opportunity that I got to do anything interior related was just like my heart would be singing. At one point, I actually reduced my days down from 5 days to 4 days, and I had one day that I just took unpaid. That was a bit of a sacrifice, because you earn in a decent wage, and then you kind of reduce in it, which is what was helping to fuel what we were doing in the house. And then you reduce it by a day, and you're then trying to build a business on the other side of it. So yeah, whilst it's, I guess it has the romantic side of it. Is I'm going to be an interior stylist, I'm going to work with clients, I'm going to do this and that, I'm going to work with flowers and color and everything. When you actually get into the business side of it, it's actually really hard work. And there are some similarities, in terms of, making a business work, growing a business, but I've got a really good network of people. One of my best friends is a marketing director, and she's been, we've been working together a little bit. So she's been helping me with marketing Wild in the World. So there are some elements of the corporate world kind of creeping back in, but I think it's just a benefit of all those things that I've learned that can now, absolutely love doing the interiors, but it's probably only part of the story, because you do have to win the work, you do have to, get the customers or the clients and things like that. So there is, yeah, it's a bit like what you were saying about moving to the countryside. It sounds very romantic, but actually there is a lot of a lot of business to go behind the scenes.
Exactly. And I think that it's just part of the journey of everything. And you're probably not going to really discuss, like, we don't discuss the boring parts of our life. We want to talk about the fun parts and the nice parts. And I feel like that is a theme that's coming up. But back to interiors, I have some questions that I would like to ask you what your
Go for it.
opinion is on. Okay. So, firstly, what is the actual impact of color? Why is it important? Why should we care between like the whole page of different greens to try and pick the right one?
So, I mean, personally for me, I tend to work with muted colours. I like calm, restful, cozy. That's the interiors that I design best. And I feel as though, color is very different to all people, so it's very subjective. So yes, while one shade might work really well for somebody, and when we talk about green, you might have a green that's really, really vibrant, but for me, I feel as though bright colors for me just feels quite overwhelming. And because of the cognitive overload that I get with bright colors, I feel like in the home, I much prefer to work with much more muted tones. So I definitely think it's about, what kind of sings to you really in terms of the color that you might go for, because bright colors are synonymous with being uplifting and things, and I certainly wear brighter colors. I do tend to dress like my home, so I do tend to be a bit more neutral in the colors that I wear. But specifically in summer, I do like to wear bright colors. But when I'm in a space and how it makes me feel, I much prefer them to be muted. That's not to say that I don't like color at all, because you can still bring color in different ways. Things like in your accessories and things like that, and in the flowers that you bring in, those sorts of things. Lovely vibrant greens of plants and foliage. It's natural greens that I really love. So if you think about like I'm thinking about a piece of artwork that we have at the moment, and it's of oak trees, and there's loads of different greens in it, but it's very muted, and I could easily pick out any one of those greens and would be perfectly happy with that. We painted one of our, we painted two of our ceilings green. They're very different shades. It's very dark, but it's a little bit more vivid. And then the other one is a lot more of a teal in there, and it's a bit calmer. So yeah, I absolutely do think that it is, affects people's moods. And there will be people that look at my house that say, gosh, it just doesn't have enough color, it's really boring. And to be honest, I have had comments like that on Instagram and TikTok and things, where they've gone, you stripped everything away, it's got no color, it's got no life. And as I say, you can't be all things to all people, and it's a very subjective, design is very subjective, so you're never going to please everybody. I think it'd be a very boring place if we did like all the same thing.
Yeah, it's so interesting, isn't it? Because then, say there's comments on Instagram, TikTok that people don't really want the same interior design as you have in your house. But and if it was outfits, you'd be like, well, obviously you won't want to wear the same thing that I do. But people don't really realize that it's kind of the same thing. Like you said there, that you dress like your house, which I love that analogy because it makes sense. Because obviously it's color, it's taste, it's style, it's texture. So why wouldn't you be
Yeah.
able to apply it to outfits as you would to in your home? So I love that analogy. And when I was talking to Tash Bradley from Lick Paints, she mentioned green, and she was like, green is nature's neutral. And when you think about it like that, because people think, oh my goodness, green, and they immediately like picture this Shrek swamp room that's just horrible. But actually, you can have the most beautiful greens that are so restful, that are different in different lights, and the power of that. But then when you say that you use muted colors and you use calm colors, it doesn't mean that your whole house is beige at all. You're
Yeah.
using the most beautiful powder blues, lovely greens as well from nature, and you're pulling from those colors. So I think that a lot of people are quite scared to do that and actually bring color into their house. And I need to highlight that you painted two of your ceilings green, because a lot of people are probably shocked at that. So what's the impact of that as well?
So I give all my rooms names, just because I usually name them after something that I love in the room. So the room that I'm in at the moment is called the Cambrian room, and it's painted in a Cambrian blue. And I remember, I'm not a big blue fan, and I don't think I've ever used blue in anything. And then the colours just came to me. So I got the swatches, I ordered it, and I just thought, I'm just going to go for it. I ordered the testers, and this was the one that was just coming singing to me, and I was really surprised that I was, drawn to this blue. Especially, in my mind, I was like, I'm a neutral lover. I love neutrals. I love neutrals. And then the same with our tump room. I've called it the tump room. The colour on the ceiling is called tump, and it's a William Morris colour, and it's from the archives. It's beautiful green, absolutely beautiful. And I remember painting. I remember we had some different swatches, and I remember had one called Jewel Beetle from Little Green, and it was really vivid, and it's a lovely, lovely colour, but it was still quite pared back. And I then I got the tump colour, and we had another one called Wooded Dell, which is a bit darker. And I remember putting it on the ceiling. I said to my husband, we're gonna paint the ceiling in the green. And he was like, really? Is that not going to be too dark? And I said, you know what? I just it's, for me, it just feels instinctive. Like, this is what needs to happen in here. So I remember we painted it, and he loved it. And I remember sharing it on Instagram and saying, oh, we've done this room, and so many people were inspired by it that they've said to me, I've painted my ceiling green because of what you had posted. And this is the year before last. So we've had a green ceiling for a while. Now people are starting to, we're painting our ceiling green, and they're branching out, and they're going for yellows and different colours and things.
We're
So
causing a
yeah,
revolution of ceiling
I
colors.
think it had a big impact. It's definitely had a big impact. And a few years on, I still absolutely love it, and I have no intentions of changing it at all. And then we've got another green ceiling. It's a much larger room, and it's a slightly different green, but it feels so calming in there, and the color, because we've paired it with a different kind of a quite a neutral. And I think if people are scared of using darker colours, I definitely think it's quite nice to colour block if you are a bit scared of it. But I'm a big lover of colour drenching, which is where you paint everything in the same hue. And we've got quite a few colour drenched rooms, and you can do that light or dark. But I think if people are a bit worried about going dark, I do think that color blocking is quite good, and going with the ceiling is one big thing. But when I've spoken to people, and I had a client recently, and I said to them, they'd already painted their room, and they had chosen some beautiful colors, but the ceiling was white. And I said to them, I really do recommend you painting. It's quite a small room, and it was a new build house. And I said, I do really recommend you just carrying that colour up, because it will give this room a completely different feel. It will make it feel much more immersive. It was a guest bedroom. And he was, a little bit, oh, okay, really? And I was like, I really do recommend it. And now he's kind of, yes, I'm gonna paint my ceiling the same color as the wall. And the same with woodwork. I love, painting the doors and the architrave and the skirtings and everything the same color. So going off on a little tangent, but I
No,
think
we
they're
love a
kind of,
color drenching tangent. Keep going.
definitely. The green ceiling is here to stay, or any coloured ceiling is here to stay, and I'm just trying to work out where else we can do it. But I think more so than anything, we would probably colour drench more than doing ceilings. But yeah, it's just a little bit more interesting than just a white block, because I feel as though white ceilings, and we had done it in our house in Worthing, when you had we had quite dark colour on the walls, and then we painted the ceiling white, and what it does is it just puts like a lid on it, so the eye doesn't travel up, and it's really good for people who have got small rooms. They think, or lower ceiling heights, they almost think, oh, if I paint it the whole same color, it's going to feel really small and enclosed. But actually, what it does is it extends the eye up, and I think that that's it's a really good trick actually to making a room feel like it's got a little bit more something to it than just, okay, this is the color the wall stops and now is the ceiling. So yeah.
Amazing. Yeah, it really does make a difference. And if you don't believe this conversation, go and look on Instagram and you will see a lot of examples of it. It is amazing, whether you use light or dark colors. It's such a big impact. So we've got color, we've got the importance of paint. What else is important in interiors? People are like, okay, I understand the color bit, but I've got a lovely color on the walls and I still hate the room. What sort of other things should they be paying attention to?
I think, when it comes to, interior design and styling, I think the most important thing, and the thing that you should start with really, is about the function of the room. How are you going to use it? Who's going to use it? What times of the day are you going to use it? And I think that in itself will kind of, it will be the thing that kind of creates your narrative for that space. And really only then can you decide, okay, that's the next step. um I think that when you um when you're designing a space, you can't you might have a color in mind, but actually when you see the way the light hits it, what direction does the sun come in? Does it even get any sun? Is it south facing? Is it northwest? We've got quite our back of our house is northwest facing, so we've got some rooms that don't get a lot of sun in the winter because the sun doesn't come round. So how will you design that room, and like I say, the function of it, so the layout of the furniture. We've got we're fortunate enough to have a living room, and we've got a second living room, which is we use it. So we've got the living room, which is, we've got a sofa, we've got a TV, it points at the TV. But we just, when we had people over, when that room wasn't decorated, we would just be sitting in a line and just almost trying to chat to each other. TV might be off, but it just didn't work as a functional space. It's fine when you're watching TV, but it just didn't work. So when we designed the other room, we were like, okay, we've got a beautiful fireplace. We're going to have two sofas either side of it. We're having no TV in there. It's about music. We're going to sit and listen to music. It's where we're going to socialize. So it just, we'll have a glass of red wine in there. I don't drink, but my husband does like his red wine. Um, and um, and it will be a much more sociable space. So I think it really does come down to the function of the room and how you're going to use it. And in that room, it's very dark. It's color drenched. It's a very, very dark color. And really, we're going to be using that room more so at night. So actually, when we have people over, it might be sort of from dusk onwards. So drawing the curtains, having the cozy, immersive feel is really what the intention was for that room. So I think it's starting with an intention rather than rushing out and buying furniture and this, that, and the other. I think it's just a case of, okay, how am I going to use this space? And I think it will speak to you in terms of like how you're going to use it. That's kind of where it comes from for me. It might not be naturally for others, but that's where it comes from for me.
And it makes sense. Like, how are you going to use this room? Oh, but I don't want to paint it dark because then it's dark through the day. Are you ever in the room during the day? I don't want to
Yeah.
paint the downstairs loo dark. Do you ever have it with the light off? No. Well, why not then? Do you know, I think that it's so interesting, isn't it, that people don't really think logically about it because they think, but I want it to be perfect at all times of the day, in all lights. I want it to be this wonderful room when you might not actually use it in that sense. You might want your
Yeah.
office to be lovely and bright because you're not really in it in the evening. Or you might
Yeah.
want to have your bedroom that you're in the morning and the evening in a certain way, but you don't use it through the day. So you kind of can map it out in that sense. And I do love that analogy because I think people don't really think about it in that way. And it makes sense when it's like, oh, but how do you use it? maybe
Yeah.
this is a certain time that you use the room. So definitely good tips on that. And then if someone is renting where they can't paint any of the walls, what are some ideas, tips, tricks for them to improve and enhance their space?
I think, you know, with that, I think it's going to be, if they're not able to paint, you're going to have to work with what you've got, and that's going to come down to the furniture and accessories that you put into the room. And it's really challenging to work with something that maybe doesn't like sing to your soul. I say that a lot, but it's something that it's probably a term I use all the time. But I think you do have to, you can bring in, wall window coverings and things like that, putting some shutters in or putting some beautiful curtains in, layering it with some textures and some, beautiful fabrics, depending on what kind of room the color is. I mean, normally rented are normally neutral colors, beiges and things like that. So, lots of things go with beige, but if you want to bring in that kind of cozy feel, I would try and do it with soft furnishings, because that you can obviously take those with you, but actually you can inject a bit of color, a bit of texture, and lighting is really, really important as well. So again, you might not be able to change the ceiling light, but who uses the big light anyway?
You should never use the big light. Never use
I know
the
we spent so much money on lights that fit in the ceiling, and we never switched them on, because I just love ambient lighting, lamps, candlelight, those sorts of things. Again, things you can take with you, that aren't necessarily fixed to the space. So they're probably the things that I would say. It's going to come down to, people underestimate the power of styling, and they're like, what even is that? But actually, once you can paint a room beautifully and it can be the most beautiful color, but it's an empty room and it doesn't have soul and it doesn't have a narrative and it doesn't speak about who you are and the people that live there. And I think it's only until you start to style in, bring in the things that you love, things that you got from your grandmother or whatever, bits of furniture that you've brought with you that you've had for years, new furniture. It's only then that really it comes to life. And so they're equally important, but I think that there's a lot that you can do if you are restricted in one thing or the other.
And I think that then you can link it back to fashion. Say you have a beautiful plain dress, but you don't put any earrings on, or, I mean, obviously you'd put shoes on because that'd be a bit weird otherwise, but you don't dress it up with a handbag or a nice bracelet or a belt, all those sort of things that make it into the beautiful piece that it is. So, do you have lovely cushions on your sofa? Do you have a nice rug that you actually enjoy walking on in bare feet? Because that's another thing with renting, I guess. You want to have a lovely, soft space that you feel comfortable in, because that's a big point.
Yeah,
And then lighting, as you say, just really digs into that. And it's something that you almost don't realize until you have it, the impact that it has of having
yeah.
wonderful lighting. So those are some great tips for people if you are renting. And I just kind of want to know about the renovation journey that you've had with Trinity Lodge, but also before then, and also the experience that you've had working with other people. What are some big things that you've learned about renovating that you wouldn't have really thought about before?
I think everyone will probably be able to identify with this, but nobody has an endless pot of money. Um, you always have a budget to work with. And so I think that the one thing I would say, that we've had to get comfortable with compromising. And sometimes they work out for the best, but I I think that when you're thinking about a space, so comfortable with compromising, but I also feel about not rushing it. So we're in our previous house in Worthing, we were there for 3 or 4 years, and we lived with it. We brought in, I think the only thing we painted was our bathroom, in that time. And we lived with it, and we brought in furniture and various bits and pieces. But I don't know if it ever really felt like us. But we knew how we wanted it to work as a space for us. So we then put in a new kitchen, when we were on this kind of the last half of our time there. We put in a new kitchen. We designed the hallway slightly differently. We've got cats, so you have hair and things like that. So we did have a carpet on the stairs, but actually they just ripped it to shreds and it just got, hair all over it. So actually what we then did was we tiled the floor so that it was easier to clean, but obviously beautiful as well. And then we painted the stairs and they became more functional. But it was only because we learned that from the time that we'd been there and taking the time. And I think at that point, it means that you're then not necessarily being so wasteful, because you're learning to live and understand how you want to use it. And then you can go, right, I'm going to use my money in this way. Here we haven't done anything. We've done a glow up on our kitchen because the layout doesn't quite work for us. And we would like to knock walls down and things like that. It's very expensive. And we've lived with that kitchen for 2.5 years. We still don't really know how it would work. If we had the money tomorrow, we would still not know how we would want it to work. Just structurally, it's a bit complicated. But I do think that living in a space for a bit of time is really, really important for longevity, because it means that actually I've really thought about it. I know how we're going to use it, and I'm comfortable with spending. Kitchens are meant to last you for 10 to 15 years. You don't want to get bored of it or work out that it doesn't work for you. So that's probably one of the things I'd say. When I talk about compromise, I think we desire. So we were doing our back bedroom, and the tump room that I mentioned with the green ceiling. And when we knew that the walls, we needed to pull some like cabinets out. It had a hole in it, sort of had a boarded up hole. So we knew we wanted to put a sort of a fireplace in there if we could. And we had these like alcoves with like built-in cupboards that we took out, and then we needed to plaster and things like that. And I really, really wanted a sisal carpet. They're the ones that are really hard underfoot, that you would never walk on with your bare feet. But I love the look of them. And we got some quotes for them, and they were really, really expensive, probably like in the region of sort of £1,800. And this room is quite small; it's not a big room. And so we're like, okay, well, actually, I would love a parquet floor. So we looked into getting parquet, and obviously you immediately identify parquet flooring with something really expensive, but it was way, way cheaper than this sisal carpet. And then what we did was we had to lay a new subfloor. So we had to take the floor up because the floorboards were all broken and rotten and things, laid a new subfloor, and then we laid this parquet floor ourselves. And then there's this massive sense of achievement and pride because you've done it yourselves. A nice thing about compromising, because actually I couldn't get this carpet, but actually the outcome was so much nicer and it's going to last so much longer. It's a floor that's kind of got tumbled parquet, so it looks like it's been there for a while, and it's just beautiful quality. So that's probably the two kind of things that I would say in terms of like when you're thinking about it. I think also does the room need redecorating or does it need renovating? And I think they're two very different things. Decorating is just going in, changing the paint color, maybe putting a floor down. Renovating is when you potentially have to take the floor up and relay it and plaster walls and knock walls down and things like that. And I think there's a lot to be said about how much more time and money it takes when you are renovating and you are doing those things. But yeah, I think that they're the two things that I would say.
I love that you just mentioned casually that you laid a parquet floor, as though that's something simple and it's not the biggest jigsaw in the entire world. Just casually, yeah, I just
Oh,
did
it
that.
was, I mean, like I was in charge of glue. So, but my husband's very technical and he's very, very good at carpentry. But it's a learnt skill. And he is just so good at that sort of thing. So I was like the labourer, I have to say. I'm not like, I'm the one with the creative vision. He's the one that's like okay, this is how we're going to do it. And I'm like,
I think
okay.
you need both. I think you need both, to be fair.
Yeah,
That's a good match.
absolutely. Absolutely do. But I mean, we had, the lasers out, and, how are we going to I mean, it was very complicated, and, it's not perfect. There are some imperfections in there. There are some joins that don't quite join up, but, you're not, the bed is over it. You're never going to see, I mean, eventually we're going to change the use of it to make it into a dressing room. So you may very well see
Any guests of yours who are listening to this, they're like, next time I'm gonna pull the bed
that.
out and gonna like
Yeah, so there are some imperfections, but I think it's there is something to be said about trying to do things yourself, and YouTube is wonderful for learning, sort of those kind of skills in terms of, and it's never going to be perfect. You're not going to do it like a professional, but it saves a lot of money. If we were to get someone to lay that floor for us, it would have taken us over budget. But by doing it ourselves, we now are like, we want to lay another parquet floor. Can't believe we're saying that, but
I love that. Yeah. And YouTube, as you say, is such a good resource to tap into.
yeah,
I've no idea who makes all of these videos with tutorials in such depth. But honestly, thank goodness for them. Like anything in the world that you can think of. Yeah, I remember I got an aux cable stuck in the car with a little cable bit, and it was stuck. And I'm like, oh my goodness, this is a nightmare. I looked it up on YouTube, a video with like 250,000 views of fixing it, and it worked. And I'm like, these people, whoever does the parquet floor tutorials or all of these things, honestly, we are thankful for them. Whoever does it,
absolutely.
it's incredible. Amazing. And then looking on through 2024 and beyond, what sort of things do you have lined up? Where are you at with Trinity Lodge as well? Where's the renovations at? Are you near the end, or you've mentioned the garden as well?
We are kind of on a bit of a hiatus, I think I would say, with the house and any big projects. And the reason for that, and I'll be totally honest, is because I left my corporate job in July last year. And as I said, it was helping to fund the work. We had two incomes, pretty good incomes, and it was helping to fund the work that we were doing. I left that in July, and I am now self-employed. So there isn't as much coming in, and there isn't as much disposable income to work to do those sorts of things. So we are now just really focusing on the things that, one, we can do ourselves, like the garden. I mean, it's a massive job. We've spent every weekend out there, and we've got some nice plans for it, but they're simple. We'd love to landscape it, but it's just working with what we can at the moment. And then in our house, when you come into the hallway, we've got another hallway that comes off the back of it. And there's kind of almost like the utilitarian area there. So you've got the kitchen, the utility room, and then doors down to the basement and cellar. And there's like a horrible narrow hallway with really high ceilings, because obviously we've got 3.5 meter high ceilings, but it's really narrow. So it feels a bit like a lift shaft. And I would love to be able to do something with that and the utility room, because it's a space we use. I mean, it's probably probably use the utility room more than we use the kitchen. So that is kind of on the wish list of things, but we'll just have to see what happens as the year goes on. But for Trinity Lodge, very much focused on the garden front and back. And we hire our house out to brands for film and photography. So obviously it's still a work in progress, and they're very open to the fact that you kind of go into beautiful rooms that are finished, and then you'll walk through. We've got another part of our hallway that hasn't been touched, and you walk through an old bathroom to get to one of the new ones, and that's like the reality of living in a renovation. So we've still got the old bathroom to get to the nice new one. It's kind of quite humbling every time you walk through, and it's really not nice. But eventually we will knock that out and make that into a bedroom. But I think the plans are going to be, we've got lots of snagging things to do, where you've kind of done something and you're not quite finished it, because it takes so much time. It's really this kind of this clicking of the fingers we talked about, and just doing a quick transition on Instagram or whether it's just not reality. It does. I think we need to normalize that renovations and doing up a house takes time, and lots of money, and not everyone has endless pots of that. So it is about trying to normalize that, I think. But yeah, we're going to have a bit of a summer off doing anything major, but I can't say that will, I've got the bug. I'm like, I want to do this and
I know
do the
you're
next
probably
thing.
going to say like a week of sitting in the garden, and then you're going to say, so what about that other bathroom? Should we just give it another look?
Yeah, yeah. But I am like that. As soon as I love the process. I love the doing, and I love that. I can't wait to see how this finished, how this ends. Will the vision come to life and everything? And then as soon as it's done, I'm like, what's next? So yeah, I'm kind of I do get quite itchy feet onto the next thing, onto the next thing. But it's not always easy to do that because you don't have an endless pot of money and time as well.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And I think just normalizing the journey of that is such an important message, that it's okay if you have one really beautiful room and the rest of your house is a work in progress. Or it's
Yeah,
okay if you actually need to wait 3 months to be able to afford whatever it is, that new sofa or that new floor or anything. And it's just part of it. And I think it's the other side of social media, because as you say, we have so much to thank social media for: the inspiration, connecting us with all of these amazing interior designers who we'd have to pay for huge consultations otherwise, but we can see the inspiration online, or we can get ideas. But then also it makes us think that we need to all be able to do it in a week or instantly. It's normalizing not having the journey. What I
yeah,
think that it's really important to stress that it is actually just hard work. And as you say, you actually enjoy the journey. You don't want it to be over just in a click of a finger as well.
yeah, absolutely. And I think, I mean, that is a really good point to kind of about the comparison thing on social media, because it's so easy to say, you know what, oh, they've got this beautiful finished house, they've got this, you don't know, you don't share everything on Instagram, you don't know what goes on behind the scenes, you don't know how much time people have spent, or the sacrifices they've had to do to get to those points. We haven't had a holiday since 2019, and I think we've had the odd night away in the UK, but it's because all of our money's gone on the house. But those are the things that you don't share that necessarily, but those are the things that when you see someone doing a quick transition on Instagram, that doesn't come into play. It's just like, oh, they've got that. But actually, yeah, there's lots of things that just go, every weekend, every evening we would spend doing up our house. So we've put a lot of time into Trinity Lodge, a lot of blood, sweat, and tears. It has been a labour of love for sure.
Super interesting. Well, thank you so much for coming and chatting to me, Jade, about your journey into interiors and, of course, your project that you're working on now. And if people want to catch up with what you're doing, see a bit of the inspiration, the Trinity Lodge befores and afters, where should they go?
So Instagram's probably the place to go. I share everything on my grid, and I share like a lot of the behind the scenes on stories. So the warts and all on stories, and that's Wild in the Wilds. And then I have a website as well, which is wildinthewilds.com. So they're the main places to find. You can get to me via either of those, website or Instagram. So yeah.
Amazing. I will link those below in the show notes, and be sure to check those out. And yeah, thanks so much for joining, Jade. I've really enjoyed our conversation.
Oh, thank you very much for inviting me. It's been lovely to speak to you.